Years ago, I bought this Addi king-size knitting machine, and using it, I was able to add a couple new items to my Etsy shop at the time, but my yarny skills still had a way to go before I could really make good use of it, so while I focused on other things, the Addi sat on the shelf for quite a long time. But lately, there's been like a circular knitting machine revolution, and I'm feeling very inspired by all these new knitting machine projects popping up on my feed every day. So to get back into it, I picked up some new yarns from Ice Yarn, and I want to crank out some swatches for you, and talk a little bit about how changing up your yarn choice can add a lot of variety to your knitting machine projects. Let's start with this. It's called Sparkle Soft. It's an eyelash yarn with bits of sparkly tinsel in it. All the yarns I chose have that eyelash effect to them, and this is my first tip when it comes to picking out yarn for your knitting machine. Any opportunity to add volume without adding bulk to the width of the yarn strand itself will help you get a fluffier project without choking up your machine on bulky yarn. The other reason I chose this yarn is because I suspected it had a stretchy core due to this braided construction. Do you see the springiness? Knitting machines love stretchy yarn. And if you've ever purchased a knitting machine before that came with some initial yarn, you might have noticed that it's stretchier than your typical worsted acrylic. So let's get it on the machine and see how it works up. Now, if you're curious about knitting machines in general, I'm going to link to some helpful videos and channels that I've turned to teach me how to use this thing. There are some amazing knitting machine teachers out there. So as I predicted, my machine loved this yarn, and I didn't get any dropped or tucked stitches. Nor did I have to weigh down my work. I just cranked and cranked until the ball ran out and faced no problems. I'm just going to let him out and see what we've got. So the fabric feels really cool. And even though it's a pretty light gauge, the fabric is not as see-through as it would have been if it was a smooth yarn. The tension is pretty even, and I think the stitches look great. Stretchy. And what you'll find with eyelash type yarns is that a lot of the fuzz comes out on the purl side. So if I turn it inside out, you can really see the tinsel and the fuzz and the sparkle. This will make a really festive scarf. And you know, since knitting machines have a fixed gauge and needle count, they can be a little limiting, so it's fun to be able to have some creative control with your yarn choice. By using this eyelash yarn, I got a little bit bigger gauge too than I normally would on my machine. So this tube is about 8 inches wide. I'd say that's like an extra inch than I would get with a normal basic worsted or a DK yarn, so this would make a really good sized slouchy hat. 10 out of 10 for Sparkle Soft. Next up, I've got this fluffy guy, Polar Soft. Another eyelash yarn with some fuzzy pieces mixed in instead of sparkly tinsel. But we've still got that braided center cord, which will provide the stretch I'm looking for. Upon first glance, it looks a little thick for my machine. I ordered these online, so I ran that risk with this experiment. It can be hard to know what's going to work in your knitting machine until you get to test it out. But so far, my machine likes this one. I also have a little Centro 22 needle machine, and I can tell you that my Centro didn't tolerate this yarn as well as the Addi, so something to keep in mind. And this yarn also has a lot less length in one ball, so my swatch is small here. But it's cute! And it worked up so soft. This feels like a dream. I immediately want to go make something to wear with this, just so I can have it on my skin. I really wish you could feel it. And I like that it has this irregular texture, so any mistakes or tension inconsistencies would just blend away in here. And just like the last eyelash yarn, most of the texture comes out on the purl side. Look at that. Luscious. I wouldn't believe a circular knitting machine made this fabric. Again, about 8 inches. Really nice size for a hat. I find a lot of Addi hats turn out a little bit on the smaller side for my taste. I got kind of a big head. So I'm really loving the bigger gauge that I'm getting out of these yarns. And with this texture, you wouldn't mind having a rolled brim either. I gotta mention though that my drawstring closure got hung up on some of the fluffiness though, so if you like drawstring closures on your knitting machine, it might be tricky with this one. 10 out of 10 for Polar Soft. A bit of a risk if you know your machine hates bulkier yarn, and my Centro couldn't handle it, but I think it just barely made the cut for my Addi. She's a champ. And I saved the coolest yarn for last. What? Look at this unicorn chinchilla. This is Eyelash Dazzle, and I think you can see why I picked this one. When I saw this, I instantly fell in love, and I was really hoping that this yarn would work on my knitting machine. It fits a lot of the criteria, so let's give it a go. And it worked perfectly. No caught or dropped stitches, totally even tension, and I didn't have to employ any tricks to get it to behave. I'm actually going to take this yarn off with a drawstring bind off so I can show it off on Instagram. Ooh, this is just wonderful. Probably the thickest piece of knitting I've ever been able to get out of one of these machines. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little itchy. I mean, you're basically wearing Christmas decor, but it's less itchy than wool is for me. Let's check out the purl side. Yep, that's fluffy. This would be so perfect for toys, little stuffed guys. I wouldn't mind making a whole throw blanket out of this, or a pillow. It was about 7.5 inches wide. When I doubled it up, a whopping 9 inches. And just for fun, let's pull these drawstrings closed and see what kind of hat this would make. It's so big and slouchy. Obviously I'd make it a little longer, but as far as addi hats go, this is definitely different. It's amazing what changing the yarn can do. So I hope you liked trying these different yarns out on the knitting machine with me. If you're interested in knitting machine stuff, I've got a couple projects lined up, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye! Okay, this is a new one. My knitting twisted itself into the carpet.
Wow.
Don't try this at home, kids. What in the world? Oh, there we go.